T-City, Brian Ortega, I can tell you for commentators, it is damn fun to say T-City, and it seems like we're going to be doing a lot more of that. What else can you say, man? I mean, not unlike Francis Ngannou, what this guy is doing, at least in terms of not being defeated inside the octagon and finishing every single person he's been in there with, really heady stuff. First UFC main event here. He had gone 5 rounds twice prior, but gets Cub Swanson out of there in the second round, made a beautiful adjustment that I know you'll speak to on the fight-ending submission. And T-City, man, all the rage here on Monday morning, and I think rightfully so.
He definitely is, man. A prolific finisher, a guy who knows how to adapt and stay calm and composed when his back is up against the wall. He was eating some shots there against Cub Swanson, but never seemed hurt, never seemed phased, never seemed rattled, never showed that he was frustrated at all. And I thought his footwork was pretty on point. I think he needs to move his head a little bit more, but whatever the case, getting to that clinch, you just see how dangerous and how sharp he is with his submission game. Everyone talks about Francis Ngannou's power, and I feel like a lot of times the submission game doesn't get as much credit as a guy who lands a huge knockout, perhaps not as dramatic, but this is a submission game that is just as effective. If he gets a hold of your head, man, you are in trouble, whether it's his legs or his arms. He's going to attack that neck, and you are going to be in trouble. Cub Swanson did a great job of trying to fight out of it in the first round. He was saved by the bell. T-City, I call him that because of the triangle city, and it's the same. Right. It's the same grip. It's a triangle grip, arm triangle grip, rear naked grip. It's all that triangle formation. So obviously, has an affinity for that, whether it's with his legs or with his arm position, and then going into that guillotine arm in, which can be tricky for a lot of guys to finish. But he was on the proper side. He was on the head side. A lot of guys go flat to their back. Not the case with Ortega. Getting the grip, getting it tighter, cinching it around the neck of Cub Swanson, and getting the finish was just a thing of beauty.
Kenny, there are probably 50, maybe even 100. It's probably not that high, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts on the UFC roster. And in terms of, there's obviously varying degrees, and in terms of the MMA application, totally different levels. But Cub Swanson is no slouch. He is a credentialed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and even he knows going in there against someone like Brian Ortega, you better be damn careful. I mean, when he was walking back to his stool, Kenny, after round 1, I mean, that was a tale of two corners. You kind of felt like fight's over.
Well, you nailed it. I think there's a lot of great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. We certainly had a lot of them in the octagon, but not all of them have been able to execute a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game plan, or perhaps a lot of them don't have that great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style that translates over to mixed martial arts. And we see it a lot in wrestling, depending on how they, either whether they tie up, whether they have a good shot from the outside, their style of wrestling, your style of grappling will really dictate how well you're going to do or how well it's going to translate over to mixed martial arts. And Brian Ortega, he hasn't won any of the big Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments out there, but it doesn't matter. This is a guy who knows how to apply it for mixed martial arts. I would put him in the top 5 as far as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in the UFC right now.
And the ability to finish those submissions,
exactly.
Right? I mean, certainly there are a lot of guys who are active pursuers of the submission, right? I mean, I think TJ Dillashaw might be the number 1 guy in terms of like submission attempts at 135 pounds. Hasn't necessarily finished all that many of them. See, and Kenny too, I know off the air you were knocking your own power, or I mean, like, bro, you would rather sub them, right? Like, you want to knock them down. Right. Hurt them and then just choke them out and end their misery. So for Ortega, though, 6 fights in the UFC, 6-0 with 6 finishes. One of those wins might have even been his UFC debut, became a no contest because of a positive drug test. But this is a huge win for him. Cub Swanson in that first round did enough to earn a fight of the night bonus, but this is a big setback, obviously, for Cub, who had built a lot of momentum, might have been 1 win away from a UFC title fight. Dana now says Frankie Edgar is going to be next. He got injured, wasn't able to compete against Max Holloway, but this puts Brian Ortega in prime position. I'd kind of like to see him maybe fight one more time, Kenny, but as we spin it forward, this guy cuts the line, man. He's on that short list of featherweight title contenders right now.
I mean, he just finished the number 4 guy in the world. That's a very impressive performance. I think that if he had the opportunity, let's say Frankie Edgar wasn't able to fight Holloway at some point, I say throw Ortega in there. However, I agree with you. I think he should fight one more I think perhaps if Ricardo Lamas gets by Josh Emmett, which is not an easy fight stylistically for him, if he gets by Emmett, I think a fight between him and Lamas makes a lot of sense. But who knows? It seems like Ortega wants to wait. Obviously, the fighter doesn't always make that decision, especially when they're not the champ. But Ortega definitely has done amazing things in the UFC. This is a guy who definitely could be a champion in the future.
And T-City certainly maximized the promotional shine he got headlining on FS1. I think you're right. And again, Josh Emmett is no slouch, right? The guy's 12-1 and getting this fight for a reason. And Team Alpha Male feels like they got a future champion there. But if Ricardo Lamas beats Josh Emmett, and maybe you do Lamas Ortega on the same card you do Holloway Edgar. Maybe you headline Lamas Ortega on an FS1 show. Both of those guys have 5-round experience, and I don't know that they would turn their nose up at that. So I think that's what you're looking at 145 pounds right now, sort of a mini tournament potentially featuring those guys. And T-City, man, I think one of the few guys, Kenny, at 145 pounds that can maybe match some of Holloway's size and length a little bit. I mean, that's just to the eye. I know Jose Aldo had a 1-inch reach advantage, but lengthwise, I mean, it's a totally different ballgame with Max Holloway. So when I see T-City, I don't know if he's ready for that type of challenge right now, but frame to frame, he would seem to match up pretty well with Max Holloway.
I like the matchup. I like the style matchup, and I agree with you as far as the reach and the length. I think it makes a lot of sense. And he just has that weapon where it doesn't matter who he's going against. If he gets you on the ground, you better be ready. So I think that perhaps the only guy who could go with him is probably Ryan Hall at 145. Everyone else, I think, gets submitted by Brian Ortega. So I like the way he matches up against Holloway. I also love the way that he did it. I mean, again, a lot like a Rose Namajunas. Just refreshing to hear Brian Ortega just being extremely real about his wishes to fight for the belt at some point, and how he wants to be the light in the UFC and help people and help kids. I thought that was just phenomenal, man.
I agree.
And even just the way, you mentioned his drug test failure, even the way that he handled that. He didn't go out and try to deny it. He didn't try to make all these excuses and lie about this and that. He said, yes, I screwed up. I made the mistake. I'm going to do better. And you know what? He has. He's addressed all those concerns. He's done it cleanly. And I just have immense respect for Ortega.
And I love his genuine curiosity as to what it's going to take to beat him in a mixed martial arts setting, right? He says it with humility. But a few more items on this main card on FS1 in Fresno, California. I think we pretty much exhausted T-City, but I do think he'll have one fight before Max Holloway. That brings us to Gabriel Mowgli Benitez, a winner by unanimous decision over Mississippi Mean Jason Knight. People forget his nickname is actually The Kid, but we coined him Mississippi Mean on the fly several fights ago, and the masses have run with it. He was not very nice on this night, Kenny. He actually bit Gabriel Benitez at one point in time. Yes. I want to obviously shine on Mowgli here, but weird instance here with Jason Knight. Obviously, I thought his toughness carried him through these 15 minutes, but what was going on with him taking a bite out of Mowgli here in round one?
Benitez, get a couple tetanus shots after that one. I don't know about that one. I think his hand kind of got stuck when he was trying to stuff the takedown, and I think his finger was just hanging out there. I don't know if it was a matter of his hand getting in there. You see right there, Benitez, they're showing video of it right now on the screen, and he's saying, this guy bit my finger, and the referee is taking a point away from. I don't think I've ever seen that. In my time in the UFC, pretty crazy stuff there. Hopefully that was just an accident of his hand getting caught and his mouth was open or something like that. But anyways, this was a great performance for Benitez, and I really think the difference was Benitez had a plan. He understood tactics. Jason Knight just did not. The only thing Jason Knight was trying to do was throw a 1-2 and kind of tackle him from the outside. And that's just not going to be good enough. And that's why when you see Jason Knight going up against guys like Gabriel Benitez, when you see him go up against guys like Ricardo Lamas, who are not only skilled but smart fighters, it's just not going to be enough. And Jason Knight's toughness is as impressive